Well, welcome to our second annual online international plein air exhibition called Into Nature. Even though the restrictions have been easing on COVID, we've still kept this show online because we had such a great international response last year. This year, we had entries from 9 different countries, all across the United States and Canada, and as far away as South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, Poland, New Zealand, and Russia. There are 10 different awards that were chosen by our esteemed panel of judges. Thank you to your expertise and your knowledge. It was really amazing to work with you, and it was really hard. That this year, the first thing I heard someone say was, it's going to be a really difficult show to judge. Thanks to Andy Evenson, Mark Hanson, and Judy Palermo. Okay, our first award is given by Andy Evenson. It's to Bob Upton for Mississippi Bend. This is his judge's choice. Would you like to introduce yourself, Andy?
Yeah, hi, welcome everyone. Andy Evenson, thanks Danielle for asking me to judge the show, and thanks to Mark and Judy for making it nice and easy as it could be possibly. And as we were going through, I think anybody who's judged a show knows how difficult it is. And when you're on a panel with a few different judges also, you have to kind of come to a consensus. So I just want to say right off the bat here that if you didn't win an award, just know that there were a lot more paintings considered. But we had to all agree, obviously, on the paintings that we gave the top awards to. So I appreciate the chance to speak about another painting here. And this one really caught my eye. I love the color scheme, those kind of orangey browns mixed in with the cool blue grays. Just really lends a nice glow to the piece, I think. Those complementary colors. The beach just shines for an opaque medium like gouache. That's amazing. It was, and then those touches of purple kind of bouncing through along the shoreline and in the water to kind of help balance everything out and tie it all together. Compositionally, I thought it was a nice challenging subject to tackle. This big flat space with the river going right up the middle, but the artist did a nice job of finding ways to introduce a little bit of an imbalance into things with the sweeping shore on the left going in there, and then as you look over to the right, there's just subtly a little bit more contrast. The darks are just a little bit darker over there on the right hand shore, and then the addition of a small little figure kind of makes that a bit more of a focal area to the whole thing. So yeah, and then it's all balanced by those few little dark rocks on there on the bottom left. So just overall a really luminous painting. Again, I love the challenge that Bob took on with this composition and the subject, and I think he handled it with a lot of skill as evidence. And it's just, nothing's overworked. You can see those little quick dry brush marks, the canvas underneath it, so it wasn't overdone or overworked. It looks like it was, despite the accuracy, it was painted very freshly and immediately. So congratulations, Bob.
Thank you very much. Our next judge is Mark Hanson, coming to us from Tybee Island, Georgia. And the work he chose for his choice was Carpe Diem by Svetlana Kornilova from Moscow.
Well, thank you, Danielle. It's been fun to do this and to work with Judy and Andy, both of whom I've known for quite a while, I guess. I'll be honest, I've never jurred where I actually got to talk to the other jurors. It's usually kind of a secret thing. You don't even know who is one of the other jurors at times. So that was really fun to just work back and forth and have discussions about the pieces that we were all three interested in. So this piece, I think it struck me right away as just a very playful painting. And a lot of the paintings in the show were very skillfully sort of representationally handled. And not that this isn't, but this has graphic dimensions to it that I really like well, it's a very formal design. I mean, it's front and center, everything's bullseye almost. And it works because of the way the artist has handled it. The inner tube is just a pattern. There's not necessarily rendered dimension to it. The water is a different pattern, and then the figure is kind of representationally painted. And you wouldn't think all those things would work together, but I think they do in a nice sort of carefree, happy way. And I think that's what I was so attracted by it. And it's a large painting. I think it was 54 inches by 70 something, or I mean, it's quite a big painting. And so I imagine that if you saw this on the wall, it'd have quite an impact, just to walk up to it and look at it. And yeah, so I think that's the main thing I loved about it. It just has a happy mood. And I think that's what I liked about the most, just kind of a relaxing, carefree mood. And that's why I chose it. Even all the way down to her left foot, I guess, where that one toe sticks up. It's kind of like, you would think, well, maybe the toes will all be together, but there's that one toe sticking up, which kind of pulls you back around, So anyways, I really just enjoyed this. I would have liked to have seen it in person. That would have been a fun painting to see. So.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. And our
Good.
third judge is Judy Palermo, and she chose Hidden Pond by Denise F. Gilroy.
Hi, yeah, my name's Judy Palermo, and I'm an oil painter in the Twin Cities. And I don't have the experience of Mark and Andy in judging these things, but it was really interesting, and they made it way fun. And what I was gratified by was how much we all sort of agreed pretty quickly right at the outset. And at the same time, we also agreed about all the good paintings we were leaving behind that we wished we could have given a little more public recognition to. So it was a good group of paintings, very impressive to look at. You can just see the breadth of it all, and you learn something because the different countries did seem to have a different style or way about them that made you look twice at them. So for this painting, what caught my eye right away was the texture of it. The palette knife work with the really thick brush strokes and the thickness of the paint and the variation of it. And that to me really conveyed the lushness and the toughness of trees that are in the landscape when you really look out there. So that to me was very convincing. The water is handled very simply, very nicely. The blue registers the color from the sky, and without there being much sky to it. Greens are tough, and this person has kept the color honest, didn't heighten it or exaggerate it in any way, but kept it pretty green. And those greens are tough to balance. And I think she did a good job with the warms and cools of it. And the whole painting has a nice feeling of breath and air and space with it. So that was why I chose it.
Thank you, Judy. So our next award is Best Oil, and it's Spencer Meager, Femme Osage Morning.
Yeah, I think we saw this painting and all three of us went, wow, how did he do that? And we just kept admiring the brushwork. With me, everything works. You've got the focal point there, and yet the shadow there is not that dark, and you can see the color and the luminosity within it. You got the cool and warm temperature in there, and I think the edges are just so lively. It makes you dance all around the painting.
Yeah, I agree. That term painterly gets thrown around a lot, but this is such a great example of a very painterly interpretation of that scene. That I just love the energy of the brush strokes, and like Judy was saying, the values are still luminous enough where you can see the color in there. I love that little bit of orange on the rooftop too, how important that is to bounce that color around. Like I was saying with Bob's painting too, that purple that was bouncing around, but just, that house could have become really isolated, but that decision to just throw that orange on there, I don't know if it's representative of some leaves gathering on the roof or what it's supposed to be, but it doesn't matter. It was just an artistic choice, and it works so well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the color harmony is what really struck me too. I mean, it feels like that light. The light feels right on it. And also, you could probably count the brush strokes. It's just, it just really simplified the rendering of it. There's light, there's shadow, done. you know.
Yeah,
and-
I really admired the brushwork. It really, like you say, Mark, it's really separate. And
Yeah.
Andy, I think that's a good word you use, bouncing. I think this whole painting bounces around and it bounces your eye everywhere. And then you get that, those little hints of vibration and the luminosity and bold brushwork too, that orange on the roof is just a dash. They didn't model it, he didn't model it and tried to make it fit the roof line or anything. It's just dashed on there, and I really admire that.
Yeah, even the reflection, same thing with the reflection. How often have you seen something that you try and make it so accurate and controlled, and then it looks too stiff, like it's not in water, there's light bouncing off it? Those quick little brush strokes that he used for the reflection are just awesome. Love this painting.
Yep.
Yeah, you could keep going, I like the windows, I mean, they're just simple little dashes of value, and it's exactly, that's a window. I'd be wanting to draw, the eave and the shadow side of the eave, but
Oh,
that's
gee,
that's hard
tell me about it.
hard
Yeah.
to do. And what's that?
I also even like that really dark blue on, what would that be? That smaller house to the side of the main house. It's so dark, and yet it doesn't distort it. I'd be afraid if I did it, oh, it's a mistake, I better lighten it. But, he left it in and it works.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I didn't even notice that, which speaks to the fact that it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, thank you. It's a lovely painting. And now we have Best Pastel, and that's High Water by Natalia Prochenko.
Yeah, we discussed this one too. The challenge once again that the artist took on when choosing this subject was one of the big reasons why I chose it to be one of the award winners. I mean, it's a beautiful painting and shows a lot of skill using the medium, but not having to rely on a lot of strong contrast. Being able to balance the vertical reflections of the trees with the horizontal shadows across the water could have really become a nightmare and distracting, but it works so convincingly and beautifully in this painting. It's just really impressive.
Yeah, I really enjoy that, and just the subtlety of the reflections, and the water itself has a color, and all the reflections are indicating the color of the water too, not just the color of the tree it's reflecting or the background.
Yeah.
I think that's really nice. It's soft and
Yes, very soft painting and very real. And I was surprised to see where this painting came from Russia, because to me, it really did kind of look like an American scene with a lot of water, where that strong light's coming in and kind of bleaching everything out, and kind of that strong twinkle where you can't really make out, solid forms, but it all just fits so well.
And our next painting is the Best Watercolor. This is Oceanside Pier by Gabriel Stockton.
Yeah, I was surprised because I'm a watercolor artist, and it was kind of interesting. This painting caught my eye right away, but I wasn't sure how the other two judges were going to react. I mean, I loved it. I'm in the camp that thinks that watercolor is at its best when it's kind of left more gestural and free. It kind of really shows the qualities of the medium, the looseness of it. But again, this painting looks like it was painted so rapidly and convincingly. I loved it right away, but it was great to hear when we were deciding. Mark and Judy were right on board with it too. So good painting is a good painting, and yeah, this is just one of my big things. Is I love being able to use some gouache to show those lights. It prevents you from being timid, trying to preserve all your lights when you're working with watercolor. And the fact that this artist just painted the painting so freshly, and then came back in with those dashes of gouache on top of some of those opaque touches to show the light areas. Again, he wasn't worried about keeping things traditional and pure and stuff. He's just trying to make a good painting. Even the blue of the pier, the structures on the pier look like it has some opaque paint in it coming back in. So just such a fresh, dynamic, strong little painting. I love it.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of drama to this painting. You've got those dark shapes, those masses. So, when you talk about no tan, this certainly has that. And, that black and white contrast, it just adds for a lot of drama. It's not a pretty scene. The colors aren't prettified, but it's strong and gritty. And, I was surprised by the size of it. I think this is a pretty small painting, right? 5x7.
Yeah.
So, I mean, think of it. If you're looking at this right in front of you, it really is a little gem, isn't it?
Well, I mess up enough watercolor paper to know that if I wanted to be a watercolorist, I'd want to be one like Andy or this kind of thing. I mean, I like that directness of it. And yeah, that looks like cobalt blue or something splashed on those buildings. Just, I've covered that up with my thumb and it just becomes a dark shape. It's just that a little bit of color, boom, and the whole thing is alive. Yeah, it's very fresh.
Yeah. I like how the foreground rocks aren't a barrier into the painting either. You put a strong shape like that in right in the foreground, and it can kind of prevent the eye from going in, but just really, they look like rocks, but they're not overly rendered, that everything works. Nice.
Yeah, for sure. A little painting has got a lot of air to it. And even the way the sky is rendered, you've got those, little bit of hazy cloud, that just suggested where they point to the blue of those buildings. And it's just kind of perfect that way.
Well, thank you very much. Next, we have honorable mention, and that goes to Dan Mackerman for Midland Vista.
I love this painting right away. There's a lot of abstract qualities to it. You got the vertical going, but then you've got all those round shapes, and nothing really repeats. So it's got a lot of interest, and it builds to the back, and the back is subtle, and you get that sense of distance. And I think it must have been a hard thing to balance, going from foreground to background, because the color isn't strong either way, but it's very convincing, very unusual.
Yeah, I just love the graphic nature of it. That view, like I say, just to keep the perspective organized with a view like that, and keep the trees looking like you're looking down on them and then farther away from them. And in all ways, he just did a beautiful job. I really like it.
Yeah, I agree. With all the little individual shapes of the houses and trees, but yet they read kind of in areas of masses, and it helps to keep everything organized really well. That little bottom left area of houses reads as one area, and then the groups of the trees, reads another area. So it prevents it from getting, really busy. I think I mentioned in my judge's comments before the show how I was hopeful about seeing some, not just the typical pretty scenes, and this is yet another example, as we've talked about on many of the paintings, of tackling something a little bit more unusual. That composition really took a lot of guts, a lot of drawing, but the way he handled the forms and created that space is remarkable. Very well done.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of drawing to it, but it's so well controlled. That vertical could have been too strong, but all those round shapes kind of beat it up some and kind of contain it. And it's a good title with a vista, because you really feel like you're getting a real bird's eye view. So it's a nice encompassing scene overall.
Now we have a Word of Merit and Cattails by Jim McVicker.
Yeah, this is another painting that was on all of our lists really early. We kept coming back to it. Again, the color that Jim manages to get in his work is remarkable. I love it. So convincing, so full of light and atmosphere. We talked about, it was kind of unique how he had the cattails kind of coming right up towards the center of the painting. But again, to spotlight them, but once again, like the rocks that I was talking about, they're not a barrier. You can see through the cattails to all the forms behind it. There's just enough interest to kind of keep your eye going through the star of the show, which is the cattails, beyond and kind of weaving through that whole painting. Just really full of light and color, and a beautiful work.
Yeah, and I think Jim pretty much paints from life, from what I've seen and read, and it's got that feeling. It's the light feels like he's been there standing painting this, not in the studio painting it. And just he really captured that beauty of that time of day. And we all commented on the little egret that's off to the left in the composition, which is a perfect relief and balance to everything else that's going on. on the right in the center of the composition.
Yeah, that little bird is a nice surprise. You're looking at the whole thing and taking it all in, and it's so well balanced. And then there's that little payoff of it. And it's such a subtle dot, but it really makes a nice difference in terms of distance. And you know, cattails, you know, the painting's about cattails, but he didn't outline them and make them a real focal point. He let us go through them into the rest of the scene that has a lot of beauty to it. So it's a good balance. He's got, you know, a big shape and small shapes, but it really doesn't feel that way. It really feels like you're out there and you can see cattails, but you're always distracted by what's around it. You know, unlike a still life when you're kind of focused on it completely and you're painting it and then you're putting a background to it. It's different in plein air. You've got this subject, but there's so much around you that distracts you from it. And I think he's captured that little bit of a feeling in this also.
Yeah, Judy, when we were talking about this during the judging too, you brought up a good point about the trees, kind of the middle ground trees that were a little bit darker.
Yeah.
How important that decision was too, because this painting could have really easily become a band of sky, a band of middle ground, and a band of foreground. But that not only just the bird to keep your eye bouncing around, but the decision to make those shadows a little bit darker kind of helps to integrate everything and keep your eye flowing through. And yeah, just everything works so well in here.
Yeah, you know, those shadows, I looked at him and I put my finger in front of him to take him away, and the painting really changed in terms of balance. Yeah. But, you know, it's something, could I emulate that myself? I probably think, no, you better lighten them. You know, so it's one of those individual decisions for the painting that he did that really made it work. And I think that takes years of painting to be bold enough to make a decision like that and to leave it in. So I really admire that.
Thank you. Our next award is the Award of Excellence. This is Pilar de la Horadada by Pablo Ruben, who is coming to us from Spain.
I think all three of us looked at this and looked at that foreground and said, wow, how he was able to make those ruts and imply the water in them. And you've still got a strong sense of line with the drawing and the background and that big tractor. And, you know, there's just a lot to love about this painting.
Yeah, the way he handled the ruts in the foreground and just that kind of combination of soft, muddy edges and then crisp, hard edges is just remarkable. It's so convincing. You don't even think twice about it to study it. And yeah, just the way that the whole thing is composed, all the way back to the little village buildings, you know, in the far distance that are so subtly handled. There's detail back there. This is, again, it's a pretty large watercolor painting, and he's got detail in there, but it doesn't draw your eye all the way back there right away. You know, it's just enough to keep you interested in the painting.
What is so amazing to me about this one too is just the artist's mastering of perspective. And in some of his other images that he had posted, he really has that nailed. And like we were talking, to get the perspective of one road coming into another road, a muddy road nonetheless, where things are just mushy and wish-washy, and, you know, and to get that all down so accurately. And yet it's not something that's so tight that you look at and decide, okay, I can't look at all that because it's just so tight I can't see it all. You know, it's really painted still. Like you said, Andy, it's got that softness and hardness, and yet everything's precise without being over precise, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you could frame the bottom half of that painting and I'd be impressed.
Yeah.
That foreground is amazing in its own right, you know. But yeah, just the way those, exactly, the tire marks and the ruts coming in from the right side and intermingling with the big directional brush strokes is just really the observational skills it takes to not only see those little subtle things, but then the skill to be able to paint it as well. Kudos, Pablo. This is a remarkable painting.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful painting, and I love, you know, that foreground grabbed us all right away. But then you look back, and I love the way he uses the line. I think for a lot of painters now, we don't want to get, you know, too close to a line. We're afraid that flattens it out and you lose atmosphere or something. But this person has really, made the best use of the line. So it's beautiful drawing, and yet you can still go back in space. And there's so much detail in the back after you finally get away from the beautiful foreground. And there's so much to look out in the back. You've got the people in there. You've got, some buildings and some fences going on. And there's just so much to see. And I just love the way he used line. You've got the line behind the tractor. It's kind of a swirly line, but it fits in so well with making us go forward and back in the painting. Just beautiful.
Thank you very much. And now for the best in show, Mark Anderson for Colorado Stoners.
I saw this painting right away and I said, wow. And I knew it would be up there for me from the beginning because, it's a scene we all see all the time, and you're out in the bright sun and you see these rocks and the sun bleaches them out. And if you're going to paint them, what do you do with all that white? So this person has got the warms and cools reflected off in the white, and great value control because nothing jumps out as bad drawing or that doesn't fit. And you've got those reflected lights in there, the oranges that show us how warm that light is, even though you had to stick with the whites to get it to look bright. But you know how hot it is, in this painting. Just beautiful.
Yeah, we talked about that during the judging, how it gives you this feeling of really bright sunlight. That's a great point, Judy, without bleaching out the rocks. If you just took a section of, the light struck areas of those rocks and put it on white paper, it would probably be remarkable, the value and the color that's in them compared to white of the paper. And yet it still works really well, despite the fact that, they didn't go that dark in the shadows either. So playing those complementary colors off of each other, the warm light, the cool shadows, that recession in the background hillside, how it goes from, it's just a little bit darker on the top right there, which also helps to pop out the bright sunlit part of that rock. And I just love, it looks like there's a little bit of a brush mark kind of smudging that light up. I always tell my students, let your light bounce around. Well, that's what happens. And that's what that artist was trying to do in making that decision, just showing light bouncing off of that rock.
Yeah, smudge something. That's what people say, right? Smudge something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a great line into the focal area too, from the foreground and the zigzag up into it, and that little blue mark that brings you back around up against the light, and he orchestrated the emphasis from bright spots and dark spots up to the climax of that one spot on that rock. And even behind the rock, he's got what you might consider a light and a dark, sharp edge, but that bright spot on the rock overpowers that even. He just orchestrated it so beautifully to make that point.
All the greens are so convincing. That we talked about that, the color of like that sage brush in there, that kind of milkier blue green, and going back into that nice, beautiful transition of the greens and the hillside. Really nice understanding of color everywhere in this painting. Love it.
Yeah. And the textures too, those soft sage brushes, they're brushy and scrubby, and they work well against the hard rock that we might feel. And even that, the mountain, the hillside going back, it gets paler and lighter as we go back to the left. And to me, that always implies a diagonal, even though the horizon line is there. And that gives it a little more energy, I think. I always feel that way when I see paintings like this.
Yeah, I think this is one that, and like you both were saying too, there were so many paintings that we kept going, you would like one and Andy would like one, I'd like one. But this one, I think we all three pretty much said, oh yeah, that we know where that's going. It just shined right away. It just, and I think that happens a lot, doesn't it, when you're during shows, certain ones just begin to kind of levitate in a certain place.
I agree with you. As I found myself gazing at this painting more and more, I started humming, the best things in life are free. So, I thought, oh, this must be my winner then. So. kind of sent me somewhere. And I thought,
We didn't hear you humming, but
I did not want you to hear me humming too much, but that's what I love about this. This isn't some exotic place that you have to take a plane to go to. We see this every day almost if you're out, in nature, and it's for everyone. And this painting really conveys that. We have this all around us, and Mark Anderson has kind of elevated this and let us see, hey, you're looking at some really beautiful stuff here.
Thanks for saying that, Judy. Yeah, that's something that I bring up all the time too. One of the main goals of art, elevating the ordinary, right? And don't paint like a tourist. Don't go for the obvious. And yeah, a bunch of rocks on here. Who would have seen a remarkable painting there? And Mark handled it so wonderfully, so beautifully, and just elevated to status of best in show.
Yep.
totally agree.
Well, thank you for all of your insightful comments. It's really quite an education listening to you speak. I'd also like to encourage everybody to see the rest of the show. It's online at whitebeararts.org/exhibitions, and you can just see some examples of some wonderful work that, it was a really tough choice to make with these paintings, because there were so many great paintings, weren't there?
Oh,
Yes, absolutely.
I was sad saying goodbye to some when we were going through it. I really was.
we were trying to gently send them off. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's not fair, and it's always amazing going through the selections again, and on a different day, you never know. Could have been a different painting. Art is so subjective, and yeah, kudos to everyone in the show, and even people. It was hard. Even people who weren't in the show.
People who entered.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for making our job that difficult, because it's so fun to look at so many nice paintings. We took a long time that day judging. That was a really long Zoom call, but it was totally worth it, because what a fun way to spend a day just looking at all these great paintings.
Yes, thank you very
It
much.
made me love art and made me want to paint or try to paint even better when I saw all this. I thought, there's so much out there, and we can all belong to it. We just have to find our own vision, and it'll work if we find it.
Well, thank you. Did an excellent job. It was really wonderful.
Thank you to our premier sponsors: Emergency Contractors Services Incorporated, New Studio Architecture, Greiner Construction, J.L. Schwieters Building Supply Construction Incorporated, Schwieters Pottery, Excel Energy Foundation, Boyum and Berenshire, Mueller Memorial, and the Pillars of White Bear Lake.
This activity was made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a Minnesota State Arts Board operating support grant, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, and in part by the Manitou Fund. We are having a grand reopening this October, and I hope that everyone who's able to, I know you're from all over the world, hopefully listening to this, but please come to our grand reopening. We have an expanded gallery and clay center and classrooms. It should be beautiful. The campus itself is going to be a beautiful thing. So anyway, thank you very much for watching.